Welcome to the Athletic FC podcast with me, Ayo Akinwolere. From the evolution of the profession to the impact of VAR, the pressures officials face has never been greater. Coming up, we're joined by a man who's refereed at the highest level of European football, both in the club and the international game. With fan-fueled conspiracies on the rise and scrutiny at an all-time high, how difficult is it to be a referee? Here with us today, we have former Premier League referee Mark Clattenburg, as well as our senior football writer at The Athletic, Rory Smith. Gents, great to have you with us. Mark, welcome to the Athletic FC podcast. An absolute joy to have you with us. First and foremost, right, look, 13 years in the Premier League. Talk to us about some of your highlights in your career within the Premier League, but also as a FIFA official, let's not forget, you know, Euro Championships and league games, favourite stadiums, you name it. You've seen it all. Talk to us.
Yeah, so if we talk about the highest level, that was 2004. I became a Premier League referee at the grand old age of 29, which was quite unusual at that that era, that young referees weren't really given chances. It was more the experienced guys. So to get a chance at 29 years old, it was quite a huge thing. And then my career just developed. While you gain experiences, certainly at the Premier League level, I was given then international chances during the Olympic Games in 2012, which was based in London. I had the chance to referee the final, which was great, between Mexico and Brazil. And then just things started to develop. You know, you're still in the Premier League, you're refereeing the biggest games, of course, in England, but mainly you still got your big focus on your European games, the competitions, also the Champions League. And you set yourself goals at every start of every season. And I never dreamt at 2016, which was the pinnacle year of my career, where I got a chance to referee the FA Cup, the Euro Championship final, and also the Champions League final in the same year, which was something, incredible that you do work hard for. Certainly, you sacrifice a lot in your life to try and achieve your goals, but to achieve them all in one go, it was such a crazy thing. And probably that was one of the main reasons why, I decided in 2017 to change careers, maybe change, cultures and try something new, because I'd achieved so much.
Is that like a convention that once you've done, maybe not a Champions League final, but like once you've done a European Championship final or a World Cup final, that's you done? Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, especially it was with the FA Cup final, but that's slightly changed because I haven't really got any experience or top international referees, because I think Michael Oliver and Anthony Taylor recently refereed the FA Cup final on more than one occasion, which that never happened in our era. Once you'd refereed the FA Cup or the League Cup, should we say, because the competition changes names every so often. But once you'd done them two finals, that was it. What you have to remember is there's a lot of politics certainly that goes on behind the scenes, but you've also got to rely on your national teams or your club teams, because even if you think in 2016, go back, forget England in the Euro, we had Manchester City in the semi-final of the Champions League, and if they went on to win against, I think it was Real Madrid, then I wouldn't be anywhere near the final. So you need certain things to align correctly that the English teams don't do very well, and the national team doesn't do very well to get that chance.
So during like Euro 2016, are you sort of sat there like cheering on Iceland? Go on, Iceland! Knock them out!
It was a bizarre one, because I remember you get the vibe. I'm not stupid. What goes behind the scenes, how people talk to you. Like Pierluigi Collina was my boss, and you sat down and he said, "You're not on holiday," and the vibes were that I have a chance to do the final, of course. And when England got beat off Iceland, I remember one of the UEFA committee members, referee committee members, tapping us on the shoulder and said, "I think you're the only Englishman that'll be happy tonight." And that was a clear message that I have got a chance at the final. And then the next year we decide as a team, my refereeing team, because we had 5 officials, we had 2 additionals, which was Andre Marina and Anthony Taylor behind the goal. So we all decided to go down to the fan zone in Paris to watch Belgium-Wales, thinking Belgium's going to win, of course. And Wales created a spanner in the works, because with Wales winning, it actually could have stopped us refereeing the final, because if Wales had beat Portugal in the semi-final, that would have been, I wouldn't have been able to do the final, of course. So you need a bit of luck as well along the way.
I gotcha. I mean, I was going to ask you why you got into it, but before that, you mentioned Pierluigi Collina. I mean, probably one of the greatest referees ever in the world game. Is he as scary in real life?
Yeah,
as he comes across on screen and to the players?
I think what you see is, I think everybody's just intimidated by him, but what he did for me in my career was just incredible. He was the only one that really supported us. I had a lot of trouble behind the scenes with people like David Ellery, Mike Riley, who didn't really support my style of refereeing, probably because I'm a Geordie or whatever. They didn't like certain, maybe me characteristics, the way I, where I dress, where I handle my life. I probably have got some regrets when I look back, of course, but when you're young, you react in different ways. And Pierluigi Collina didn't care about the politics. He didn't care. He wanted a referee, a good referee. And he actually taught us a lot of things, not just about refereeing, because refereeing, people talk about the laws of the game. That's just one part of being a referee. We talk about understanding the game. And he taught me an awful lot about players' tactics, football understanding, what the players expect. And that made me a better referee. And that then actually made me better with players, because players realize that actually he knows what he's doing. He doesn't just knows the law. He actually understands what's going to happen next. And players trusted us more when I started getting advices from Pierluigi Collina. So he was a big influence in my refereeing career.
Yeah, fascinating. Right, let's go slightly back to the beginning here, because I'm always fascinated by the people that actually choose to become a referee, because it's a job that you face a whole heap of scrutiny, and you put yourself in the lines then pretty much every match you play. What was in it inside you that made you want to be a referee? Did you play much when you were a kid?
It's easy, because I think every child that loves football wants to play football. I think, I was no different. I wanted to play. I played Sunday morning. I played Saturday. I played for the school. I did everything I wanted. I wanted to be a professional footballer. I wanted to play for Newcastle United, of course. But you realise very quickly when you start developing, you get bigger. I wasn't getting too tall. There was players getting taller than me, and I just wasn't good enough. And then it was my school teacher, who Mr. Reach at Cramlington High School, said, "Mark, look, we're going to invite you and some other students to go on the referee course, and would you like to go on it?" I says, "Of course, I would like to go on it. Why not?" Did my course and started refereeing junior football Sunday mornings. And the Sunday morning football was great, because it gave us the grounding that I needed to not just, people, I just talked about laws of the game before. In Sunday morning football, it wasn't about laws of the game. It was survival, and how you survive that difficult environment, because potentially you've got 22 players who've been out the night before, enjoyed themselves, and they're coming out to, kick out of each other, basically. and as a referee, you learn how to survive, and that helped me certainly, start in the early part of my career, because I was like 16 years old, 18 years old, refereeing men's football. And I used to look at the team sheet all the time and think, can I find somebody that's younger than me? And it never happened for years. And, then very, very quickly through the systems, I was fast tracked quite quickly to being a Football League referee at 24, 25 years old, which was unique at that time. I was the youngest ever post-war. I think, it was very, it was a big honour for a 25-year-old to be refereeing Football League level. And after that, it becomes a profession, and you're focused in being, a professional referee. And that's the ultimate, when you start off, you don't realize what's going to happen, because I was an electrician, and you're doing, games on a Saturday. And people used to say I was crazy, because I would refuse overtime at work, double time, because I just wanted to be referee a Saturday game for like 20, maybe £20, which you lost that £20 because you lost it in the bar afterwards, buying everybody a drink. So it was, you never did it for the money. But then when you started getting higher up the pyramid system, the financial rewards were really good. And then, I think every child thinks, I would love to go and play in the big stadiums. And, when I got the chance to referee in the biggest stadiums in the world, it was such an amazing thing that I would never have done that as a football player. To do it as a referee, it was an incredible thing. And being part of just a game of football, you're a part of the game. Such an amazing thing to do.
Yeah, I just wonder, for someone who did well so young, I mean, what were your toughest moments? And I'm sure there'd have been so many mistakes along that career, even when you made it to the Premier League. And I'm sure you're still constantly learning in your job as well, because the stakes are much higher at that point as well.
You realise, you see certain situations and you learn from them. And mistakes are, problem is in refereeing, you're not allowed to make mistakes. Players can make mistakes, but referees seem to can't. But the only way you can learn and develop as a referee is by making mistakes. It's strange, but that's the way it works. And, even when I got on the Premier League in one of my first 2 years, and, the Merseyside derby always sticks in my mind, where I didn't perform very well. And, I missed a clear penalty at the end to Everton. And, it created such a difficult moment for me. But when I analyse it back, it made us a better referee, and then you start working out and becoming like, you analyze yourself, and you analyze the decisions, and you don't make them mistakes again. So it helps you along the way. And the Oban Mikel situation, when I was accused of being a racist, that was probably the most toughest part of my life, because it was something that I was put inside without much support. PG World didn't know how to deal with it at the time. I had media outside my house, and the media and scrutiny around it was really, really difficult, because everybody thought I was guilty. And even at first, I remember even the first few hours and first day, I was in bits trying to work out, thinking, had I actually done it, in the heat of the battle, because I questioned myself, and I'm thinking, that's not the words I would use. It's not something I would do, but you're still questioning yourself. And it was something that, in the end, once I was proven innocent, then I thought I didn't want to come back refereeing. And people were saying, well, why? Because, you haven't done anything wrong. But I'd lost the love. And it took us about a year to fall in love with it again, because, after being accused of something you hadn't done, it took a lot out of us, mentally and physically. And I thought, is it really something I want to do? But going back to what I said before, being a full-time referee is difficult, because you want to do it, but you lose your industry. I was in the electrical industry, and then after being out of the electrical industry, maybe 10 years practically, it's difficult to go back into it. So what do you do is, if you quit refereeing, what job can you do? Yeah, you can go into the management side of refereeing, which is quite lowly paid, or you try and find a job in the outside world, which is difficult, because you would have to retrain.
Talk about the scrutiny, and the Mikel one was really fascinating. But what happens when that scrutiny also hits the spaces of social media as well? You see a lot of young referees now dealing with it.
We didn't have social media when I first started. In fact, we used to laugh, because we only used to, like, you would read the newspaper on a Sunday morning to read what you've been, your performance on a Saturday. And people used to say to me, oh, you've had a 7. And I'm like, well, I don't want a 7, because you used to get marked out of 10. And I used to always want a 6, because I used to turn the newspaper upside down and say to my wife, look, I've got a 9. So I didn't want a 7, because I couldn't turn it upside down. But that's how people remembered, because if they weren't at the match, you would get a small newspaper cutting from a journalist that, might say I was wrong in my decision, but then it was forgotten about. It wasn't online. It wasn't permanent. It was fish and chip paper, we used to call it, and you would never see it again. But unfortunately, now everything's on the World Wide Web, and it sticks. And there's videos, there's people with mobile phones now, and people are commenting a lot more. And even near the end of my career, and everybody wants praise. That's the thing. I think when you look at social media, people want that to see if they're actually done well, but unfortunately, it doesn't really happen. You might get one person say you did okay, but millions of people say you didn't, because you've upset one team, of course. So I tried to avoid it, but it's certainly a difficult subject.
It's funny, I started my journalism career only a couple of years after you started your refereeing career. And one of the early jobs you did,
you don't look old enough, Rory.
Only a couple of years, Mark. To be fair, they're sitting and writing down your opinion stuff is a lot easier than running around on a football pitch. But the ratings was always something you kind of did as a junior journalist, and I don't think we realised at the time how seriously everyone involved took it. I remember a former player telling me that he used to get all the papers on a Sunday and check his ratings, and I kind of had to break it to him really gently that both 6 and 7 mean the same thing, which is I've not really noticed you, and I have to put a number next to your name. And I think for a referee, that's probably that is what you want. That it probably means there hasn't been like a really kind of difficult decision that you've got right, in which case you would get an 8 or a 9. You're not getting a 10. Come on. But it also means there hasn't been like a controversial decision you've got wrong, in which case you'd be at sort of 4 or 5. And I think the issue with social media is there will be a lot of people who watch referees and think that referee has been a 6 or a 7 out of 10. But you don't write that down. There's no reason to put that opinion out there. Whereas if you think the referee has done you wrong, you put that out there.
I was just wondering, from a referee's perspective, and I presume this is down to experience, how do you manage letting the game move on, but also sticking to the letters of the law? Because there's something about the stop-start nature of football, and also sometimes people feel referees are in control of that. You know, you're a fan of the game, you love to watch good football, but also you've got a job to do on the field as well, you know.
I remember one game at Norwich against Chelsea in the Premier League. I didn't whistle a foul in the first half. Not one foul in the first half. And to have a first half in the Premier League without a free kick is incredible. But I always took risks because I wanted the game to be brilliant to watch. Probably that's not my job, but I can certainly, you know, we have to accept that football is also an entertainment business, and people pay a lot of money to watch good football. And yeah, the referee doesn't make the skills, but one of the skills of a top referee is having the ability to know when to let the game flow and when to not let the game flow when you know that the players are getting frustrated, for example. But the fans don't see that. People don't see that from the outside. Only the people that's inside would know that the players are starting to get a little bit excitable, which means as a top referee, you would know then to say, look, let's step in here, because what you don't want to do is reduce teams to 10 players, because you know then it's going to be a huge talking point, which you can prevent, you know. And for me, I always wanted to prevent things happening. Yeah, you've got the laws of the game. You've also got the interpretations of the law. You've also got the, you know, the occasion. You've also got there could be a lot of things behind, you know. I've all been in games where football players lost a child, for example, and they've come back to play, and you've got to know all of this because you've got to know how to treat people. But if you follow the laws literally, you know, you're not going to, you end up probably spoiling the game, and then you get criticised more. So it's having that balance that, and I always used to say, the best referee is the one that can be accepted by everybody. They might not agree with things, but will accept it. And as long as you got accepted, and I didn't always get that right, of course, and that's when I got criticised. But if you could find a balance and you could keep everybody as happy as possible, then people give you less problems. And I think, you know, there's a lot of elements in refereeing that, you know, a lot of people don't understand. And yeah, laws of the game is one of them, but there's a lot of other things that top referees have to go through in their decision making to make sure that you're trying to get the right decision. Unfortunately, now in football, there's so many opinions. Then is it the right decision anymore? Because, you know, I used to say as a referee, that's a foul. And then other people are saying, it's not a foul. You know, what can you do? You can't win. So what you've got to try and do is be consistent, and certainly through education to say that's a foul, and try and be consistent going forward. So yeah, difficult.
Was that something you kind of, was it the game that set the tone for how you'd referee it? Would you kind of, it didn't depend on your mood and like how you woke up in the morning?
Of course it did.
I'm in a terrible mood today.
I slept the night before. Of course, no, it was...
But was it kind of, you sort of took like, you know, you sort of take the temperature of what the game is like, and you can tell that, okay, this one's a bit fractious.
Well, you know, for example, people talk about the Battle of the Bridge, you know, and people criticised us and some people praise us. It's one of them. It depends how you want to look. If you're a purist, then I'm going to get criticised for my performance because I let a lot go. The neutral will think it was one of the best games they've ever seen. So you've got to have a balance between protecting the players, of course. There's some things that were out of my control that I didn't see. The Dembele, for example, when he gouged Costa's eye, that was off the ball. It's difficult to spot. But there was things that I could have done differently, which would have had a different outcome in the game. And in the end, the result was, you know, what it was. But I knew before the game how much it meant, because Chelsea were not having a great season. But when players are firing into the media comments, you know that there's a lot underlying here. And I'm going in, not with a game plan. You've got to be careful when I say game plan. It's not a game plan as such, but you've got to analyse what's happened in previous matches with the teams. Is it a derby? There's a lot of factors go into, preparation of a referee. And, I need to know what I'm going to face. I can't just go in like negative before a game. I need to know everything that I have. It's more, I want to be prepared physically and mentally as much as possible to try and come out of the game as successful as I can, and for people to be as, satisfied that the referee hasn't influenced the game.
All right, Mark, you left the Premier League in 2017, and last season you returned to the Premier League in an advisory role with Nottingham Forest before stepping down at the start of May prior to the end of the season. Firstly, what was the experience like working with Nottingham Forest, and also how did that come about? I'll talk about what happened in between the Premier League, you leaving and then coming back later, but just let's focus on Forest now.
Yeah, it was an interesting challenge, and one that I actually enjoyed. It gave us a different perspective of football. Certainly helped us understand what goes on with a football club. And one of the biggest things I learned was how much impact a refereeing decision can be. The moods, players' moods, coaches' moods, the owners' moods, everybody within the football club. If the field have been wrong, for example, the mood's completely different. If they win, it's an incredible feeling. So to see that within the football club, I didn't realize how much my decisions impacted people. So I saw a different element of, what goes on behind the scenes of a football club, certainly between the owner and the club. So, it was a privilege, a short period of time to be there. And I certainly wasn't just there for refereeing. It was, a lot of other things. I knew Mr. Marinakis, who owns Olympiakos in Greece. And while I was there, head of refereeing in Greece, we had many fights, of course, because he wanted his team to win. But in the end, he had a mutual respect for the work I was doing. And also, he wanted me to try and help him understand, because what he could see, for example, in Greece or in Europe, the refereeing style and decisions weren't consistent with what was happening in the Premier League, and he was getting more frustrated because, at the end of the day, he wanted Nottingham Forest to stay in the Premier League, and they were, suffering with results, and they were had the risk of being relegated. So he just wanted, somebody around the club that he could speak to personally, and I was more advising the board than I was getting involved in refereeing. And I didn't have any influence because I'd been out of refereeing 7 years. It's a new group, and I didn't know any of the group, and I didn't really want to know the referees. I don't speak to them. They've got a difficult job without me even speaking to them. I don't have any of their phone numbers. So for me for people to suggest that I was trying to influence anything, that wasn't the case. I didn't even go and see the referees. I wasn't really interested. All I wanted to see that Nottingham Forest were getting, fair decisions, or, they were getting the same as other clubs. And at that time last season, I think everybody will accept, including, their own KMI panel that the Premier League have, that Nottingham Forest won the end of some raw decisions, which were having a material impact on their performances and also their league positions. It ended because, the pressure from the outside and the media and, probably the stakeholders, every week I was being under huge scrutiny for doing a job, which I cannot half understand why, but I don't accept why a person who was a top referee, left refereeing 7 years ago, couldn't go and work in a different job. It seemed to be that I'm labelled as a referee, and therefore I can't do any other work. So it's disappointing because I have a knowledge of football. I haven't just got a knowledge of refereeing. I understand the game, and I understand a lot of things, tactics. So I should be able to pass on my experiences, and unfortunately, some people don't allow that.
Did you find that if there were decisions that Evangelos Marinakis was unhappy with, if you thought those decisions were right, they just happened to be kind of not in Forest interest, did he accept your explanation?
Yeah, and that was a positive, and because we're talking about cultures here. We've got different nationalities. Greeks are certainly different, have a different mentality than English people, and I was lucky that he had somebody around that understood the Greek mentality, but also understood the English mentality. So to have that was quite important. And, I could filter a lot of things that I not necessarily agreed with. And therefore, it was my job to tell him that I don't accept that. I don't think that's right. And he would respect that because, some decisions that I've made from outside of referee, and I'm talking within the club, it actually had a positive impact for him, and he respects them judgments. So when I said, for example, it was a correct penalty, or for example, I remember that there was a game that played against West Ham, and I think it was my first game I'd went to watch actually, and he wasn't happy with Nottingham Forest should have had a penalty, and it was clear. I think Nico Williams deliberately got tripped, and it was a clear penalty. And it was a young referee, and to be fair, it was one of them where the crowd put the referee under pressure to end up sending Calvin Phillips off for 2 yellow cards, and I didn't believe Calvin Phillips should have been sent off. And the owner was upset about not having the penalty, but I had to get the balance back to say, look, you've won 2-0. It was 1-0 at the time. Calvin Phillips shouldn't have been sent off. And for me, a send off is more important because it was, 1-0 could have went 1-1. But while they had down to 10 players incorrectly, in my opinion, and the KMI panel after that proved it was wrong, it ended up 2-0 to Forest. It didn't affect the result, but he was still upset that another decision had gone against him. But I had to give him some balance back that, yes, it was correct. He was right that it was a penalty. However, the main point of the game was the red card, in my opinion, to Calvin Phillips, which tipped the match towards Nottingham Forest, and in the end they won. So you have to get that balance back, but not everybody sees that balance. They just care about that one decision.
Yeah, you talk about being scrutinised for that disposition, Mark, but also, you leaving the Premier League in 2017 and go to Saudi, that was another one that raised a few eyebrows as well. Do you think, in conjunction, those two things inevitably had weight to why people were probably going, what you're doing? Are you a referee? Are you still part of the game, or are you just here to, find a new job for yourself?
Yeah, I had other jobs. I was working in the media, so, I've worked for many I had other jobs, so I'd worked in Greece. I'd done charity matches. I'd worked, write a column for a newspaper. So there was lots of different things I've done. So I wasn't just a referee. I should be allowed to, pass on my experiences, what I can see. For example, I know what a good player is. I've seen good players, and I've said, if he's a good player, then you would hope that, for example, one of the scouting would go and watch it. We've all got opinions, and certainly just because I left to go to Saudi Arabia, that was an easy decision for me because, one, I didn't have the motivation anymore to referee, games in England because I'd done them all, and it was then hard every week to say, you're refereeing Man United against Man City again, because I would do them every season, and I'm thinking to myself, I need a new challenge, and also the chance of me refereeing the World Cup final would have been slim to zero. So I'm going into the World Cup thinking I'm not going to referee World Cup final, regardless of if England had got knocked out, because I would have been the only referee ever in the history to referee everything. And that doesn't happen in politics. So that you're going in with a negative feeling. When Saudi Arabia offered us me contract, which changed me family's futures, it was an easy decision. And, sometimes what I put them through for 13 years in the Premier League, and before that, it was time for me to pay them back and, to give them, chances in life that we wouldn't have probably had as a referee in England.
Something that Mark said earlier really struck me, that when you went into Forest, you sort of saw the impact that refereing decisions have on people inside a club. And we, as fans, we forget that the club isn't just the extremely well-paid players. It's the staff in the kitchen. It's all the coaching staff. It's people who've got basically quite normal jobs just inside football. It's the people who work in the offices, the HR department of a football team. They are companies. No, we're not meant to say they're companies, but they are companies. They employ lots of people, and it's the only industry in the world, or sport is the only industry in the world, where the whole mood of the business isn't defined by the Q3 results. It's literally, did you draw against West Ham at the weekend? That is kind of what defines it.
Yeah.
But I think the same thing happens with referees, that there is a tendency among fans, among players, among managers, executives, not to regard referees as human, which seems really stupid, and it sounds like a massive exaggeration. But I think we ascribe all these motivations to what referees do. And I mean, I won't got this right every time either, but I've always for a long time made a point in coverage of trying to acknowledge when referees do well in an unspectacular fashion, but also not kind of buying into this really easy kind of out of, well, the defining thing here was the referee. Because I think too often it's easy to look at referees and think they want to be the centre of attention. That is an easy thing to look at referees and do.
That's furthest from the truth, isn't it, really?
And it is. I mean, but then at the same time, if there's someone standing with a whistle in the middle of 22 people, it's a bit like, well, they're the one who's dropped the tool to get attention. But I think mostly they are people who, and obviously, it takes all sorts, but they're trying to do their best in an incredibly difficult situation, a situation we are making more difficult by failing to understand that they are doing their best. And I find it strange that it's been tolerated for so long that the immediate thing that everyone comes out with after the game is, well, the referee did this wrong. And you can have a manager who's, naming no names, put Diogo Jota up front for no reason, despite the fact he's not playing very well. And you think, well, actually, the referee is not the issue here. The issue is your tactics, or they are all of a piece. And I think that on both sides, so it's interesting that Mark says that he went into a club and kind of realised the impact that a referee can have on a club. But I think on the other side as well, that we as a football culture in general don't necessarily realise the impact that our reactions have on the referees as people, and that's really important.
But the problem is as well is I think clubs don't, and I always said that, for example, Michael Oliver should go into Newcastle United and train with them and integrate with them and get a better understanding, because I remember the issue in 2012 with the Chelsea situation and with Oba Mikel, and I remember Bruce Buck coming to St George's Park, and because the referees were going to go on strike at that point, and everybody was upset because the scrutiny I was put under wasn't fair. And his comment was, we were duty bound to report the incident. Right? Yeah, you're duty bound, of course you are, but you should have done some investigation first, of course, because it wasn't Oba Mikel that was it. He wasn't the one that heard it. It was Ramirez, who didn't speak any English. So very clever that a person who can't speak English can make up something that I've said in my Geordie accent. But that's another point and another argument. But Bruce Buck said, what's your problem to us as referees? You live in a gated community. You've got security guards protecting your house. And that was the first time you realise you don't know what goes on in the real world. We're just referees living a normal life in a normal housing estate. We don't have the protection like you do with football players. And they're so far apart. And that's the other thing, Rory, is, and that was something I understood. They're in a glass, football clubs are in this glass house, and they don't realise what is outside. And everybody is duty bound, of course, to protect the image of the game. And, everybody gets frustrated with referees. And being inside the club, for me, you hit a really important point. Everything that filters down, it's not just the football players. Yes, they've got a duty to try and play well, but the kitchen staff, if you get removed from the Premier League, the financial hit is so much that they know that they could be made redundant. And, it's the morale, the mood across the whole of the club is always affected by the results. And you're right, I've had many arguments recently that the referee's been rubbish. However, okay, he might be rubbish, but you didn't play very well over 2 legs. You've lost the game because you lost the first game, for example, 3-0. It wasn't the referee's fault when you lost 3-0. It's because, your team didn't play very well. So, I think there's an excuse culture brought in now where there wasn't years ago. When I first got in the Premier League, there was less excuses. But I think more and more, maybe, I don't know if it's financial, is it pressure? I'm not a person who is best to comment on that, but there is a huge blame culture now than there ever was. And while that's in place, and nobody's really, challenging it to try and stop it, referees are always going to have that, because internally they probably are blaming the players. Like, I think Arne Slot will probably have some choice words with his players because they didn't play. If, he would love to try to divert that away from his players to blame somebody else, but unfortunately he's not going to blame himself, and he couldn't really blame the referee because the referee didn't really do anything wrong. I thought he had a very good game in a cup final, which isn't easy to referee a cup final because, there's so much at stake. So, there's always this underlying issue that he's to blame. And it's sad because, working for the club, I could understand both sides. I could understand the referees, but ultimately, I think what's created a bigger problem is the VAR system. I think, for me, everybody accepted a referee making a wrong decision or analysed the decision wrong from what he saw or what he felt or what he thinks he saw, whatever, all of them factors. But in the end, people accepted that. But what they can't accept, VAR still not getting it right. And this is what I think's created an even worse feeling in football, that they think they've got a system in place that is foolproof, and it's not. It's not even technology. I hate when people say technology. It's not. It's a human being. And yes, the offsides now change because it's more technology based. However, it's still a human being that has to verify the decision. So it's a human error. And yes, we get upset because the referee's made a mistake. But I think it's created a bigger problem now because the VAR doesn't correct it, and it's a bigger frustration that you see out your two eyes. And, we'll go back to me Nottingham Forest days, the Luton Town, the Everton match with Stuart Atwell being a Luton fan. That created a story that the media were going to bring to Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest were, aware of it, and they felt it was an appointment that shouldn't have been made because it just puts everybody under pressure. And in my world, when I've appointed referees, I'll understand that because I wouldn't appoint a referee to a game knowing that he could have a material impact on it, because it's not fair for the individual. You've got, as an employee, an employer, you've got to protect your employees. They've got a duty of care. And putting Stuart in that position wasn't a good duty of care because you put him in a situation which you don't really want. But in that match, there was two decisions, in my opinion, not three, but there was certainly two decisions in that game which you can accept the referee making a mistake, but I couldn't accept the VAR making that mistake. Even from a refereeing point of view, even if I was analysing it as a referee, I would be thinking, why would I make that mistake? Because one, there was a clear handball, but his arm clearly was outstretched. Ashley Young stopping the ball coming in, and the last one was, a clear foul from Ashley Young, and I think it was Hudson-Odoi. So yeah, we can move away from opinions, yes or no, but when they're so wrong, clearly wrong, I think it creates the bigger problem because there is a tool there for the referees. But I just feel that at the moment, VAR isn't being used correctly in the Premier League, and this is creating this big fight in England. It's not happening everywhere. It just seems to be a big problem in England at the moment.
Yeah, just for context, I just want to point out that the game Mark's talking about was the game between Nottingham Forest and Everton around Stuart Atwell's suitability as a Luton fan to be officiating the game. Nottingham Forest ended up putting a tweet out saying 3 extremely poor decisions, 3 penalties not given, which we simply cannot expect. We warned the PGMOL that the VAR is a Luton fan before the game, but they didn't change him. Our patience has been tested multiple times. NFFC will now consider its options. And now, just before we move on from this, Rory, I just wonder how much of something like that or a tweet like that kind of fuels this idea of conspiracy when it comes to refereeing and things like that, because it's an everlasting conversation. Arsenal fans will have their chat, Manchester United fans will have their chat, Wolves fans will have their chat around that and decisions that be made against them.
Yeah, I think that tweet's not, you'd be struggling to describe it as helpful, to be honest. The identity of Atwell as a Luton fan, as Mark says, it clearly if there is one club that is unhappy about it, I'm certain that Stuart Atwell did not make any of those decisions just he's thinking, I bet I can keep Luton up here. I am certain of that.
No, I'm certain of that also.
Even if but the thing about integrity is that the optics of it are just as important as the fact of it. It doesn't matter whether in your heart, whether PGMOL can say Stuart Atwell is the most neutral man in the world. He is completely capable of putting his feelings to one side, as, to be honest, quite a lot of people are, and he will do his job to the best of his ability. That is absolutely will have been his approach, and you can see why PGMOL wanted to kind of take that tack. But if the appearance of integrity is questioned, then integrity itself is questioned. And there is no reason why. It seems really kind of obstinate, pig-headed, I'm not quite sure what the right word would be, just to stick with him if you know that one of the clubs is going to make an objection. And I don't think that should be particularly controversial to say. It's perfectly possible that Stuart Atwell is not prejudiced in favour of Luton, but equally that he should have been removed from the game to avoid any appearance of impropriety. And it's really important. I think it's one thing that has been lost a little bit, because there's almost, I don't know what Mark thinks about this, but it feels like increasingly there is a kind of state of conflict in which PGMOL are kind of trying to fight their own corner a little bit and push back on a lot of stuff that is probably unfair criticism. But the more they kind of dig their heels in, the more you wonder if their response is not as helpful as it should be. That would be maybe my kind of assessment of it.
Yeah, listen, it was simple what happened. And, on the Friday before Nuno's press conference, the journalists were going to raise it. And the club were made aware. There was some research done, and it was realised that it was clear from some social media, a lot of things, that Stuart was a Luton Town fan, making people aware that was Everton, Nottingham Forest and Luton were in this relegation one place. But there was also the points deduction as well, hadn't been announced yet. So there was all of this in the pot. And I tried, in my capacity within Nottingham Forest, was to call PGMOL and to say, look, are you aware of this issue? And PGMOL's stance was they weren't aware of it, but they wouldn't remove Stuart from the appointment. I said, no problems. The wish of the football club is that he's removed and changed, of course, but it's your decision. We can't force you to change. However, we just want you to be aware that this situation is going to be raised by journalists, but Nuno will not speak about it, but to be aware. And I think what PGMOL had let themselves down was, they'd lost John Moss weeks before to take up a role within Scotland. And I feel that whoever was doing the appointments weren't aware of this conflict of interest, because all referees fill in conflict of interest at every season. For example, your family member could be a season ticket holder at Manchester United, and you'd have to declare that your family member is a season ticket holder at Manchester United. So all of these conflicts of interest are stored within a database that must have just been overlooked, whoever's doing the appointments. And Howard is the manager of the PGMOL, Howard Webb. He would have just overseen it. He has people to do his job, of course, but he's not going to scrutinise every appointment. He's hoping that somebody has done that. And somebody's failed in the system because John Moss had left.
Okay, well, Rory, just very quickly on this idea of conspiracy and what can be drummed up, especially around referees and fans. You recently did a podcast with Andy Mitten talking about Turkish football and the way in which conspiracy has impacted the nature of refereeing. How dangerous a precedent could that possibly set in many respects?
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous because the like I say, the appearance of integrity is just as important as the fact of it. Like that. It's natural for fans to believe that referees are kind of biased against them. It's not ideal. It's very rarely true. It might occasionally be true, but I suspect it's not. But it's probably unavoidable. The moment you have institutions, this is what Andy and I talked about, the moment you have institutions and executives calling conspiracy, I think you're getting into really dangerous territory. And I do wonder with the Forest tweet example, I suspect, and I don't want to stereotype anybody, I suspect that was a little bit of Greek football culture coming into England, and it was our first kind of exposure to that, and Mark will have experienced this in Greece firsthand, that paranoia that pervades Greek football, where they are all convinced, PAOK and AEK and Panathinaikos and Olympiakos, they are all convinced that everybody else has been bought. That is their abiding belief, and it's the same in Turkey, which Andy and I discussed. You see it with Real Madrid. Real Madrid very kind of prominently right now. Going through obviously there's the Negreira case around Barcelona, which again the optics are bad. Barcelona say the money they were paying to a leading referee was perfectly innocent, and I'm sure it was. I'm sure that it's just advice.
It doesn't help though, Rory.
But it's really not very helpful. And it's the same. You see this with Liverpool fans bring this up a lot, and it's something that I think is completely innocent, but the look of it is bad, and that's the referees going to. I think Michael Oliver was one of them going to Abu Dhabi a few years ago and doing games, kind of that effectively being paid for their work by the owners of a Premier League team. Oh, that's the allegation. Again, completely innocent, but the look is bad. And that is the one thing that I think has become lost on both sides a little bit, is that you need to maintain the appearance of integrity. And if you don't, then you have a real issue, because, you know, we currently have Real Madrid who have embarked in Spain on the least likely case of victimhood you can imagine. That Real Madrid are the victims of an institutional conspiracy. That is
tiniest violin ever,
but the thing, what I find is, because I'm doing some work in Turkey at the moment, watching Fenerbahce and Galatasaray matches till the end of the season, but also being in Greece, Egypt. What the difference is compared to England is England's, the federation is completely separated between a business, and the Premier League's business is owned by each club to have an equal share. So there's an equal share for the Premier League teams. So they actually own their own competition. That doesn't happen anywhere else. So why you get the conspiracy theories is there's complete controls within the federations. By every 4 years could be one club's official. For example, in Greece, when I was inside, there was a complete change from an ex-PAOK. He was replaced with Ike. Now it's back to PAOK. So what they're all trying to do, they want somebody within the board to be able to control the federations, to then be a part of their football clubs. It happens in Egypt. When I was in Egypt, it was Zamalek controlled. So Al Ahly think everything is going to Zamalek, and the referees are put under pressure to give things for and against. And they want certain referees appointed, which I saw in Egypt, and that's why I left, that they were trying to control who was refereeing which matches, which for me, the best referees should be the ones that are performing the best, but there was big pressures put. So what you've got to understand, and what people don't understand, is these are because of the federations being created by members of clubs. So they think that they're getting, if they don't win the championship or they don't get favourable refereeing decisions, they believe there is a conspiracy behind it because of the control within their football. But in England, that doesn't happen. It's completely independent. PGMOL referees are completely autonomy, and this what should help. But problem is now, how many English owners is in the Premier League? There's not many. Maybe most of them are. What you're then creating, you're creating a foreign effect. For example, I remember the Premier League, a member of the Premier League board, one of the employees of the Premier League said, why is every football club wanting to sue the Premier League? And it's simple. Majority of clubs are owned by Americans. The Americans use this as a tool every time to start legal proceedings against everything. So when you have certain cultures come in, everybody has different conspiracies, and it creates this pot at the moment where football was run by majority English, and then there's more and more foreign buyers have come in who, they can't afford their product to be outside of the Premier League. The Americans certainly don't understand relegation, for example. They would rather have their team staying in the Premier League because they want to make as much money as they can. But more and more conspiracies are coming up because of the different owners that are coming in, and it just, it creates this. But England, I don't think it's an issue. It's just created from what they see, certainly coming from the outside.
Well, Mark, away from your experiences, this season, referee David Coote has been banned, actually, from officiating in UEFA competitions for 16 months after being accused of violating conduct rules and bringing the sport into disrepute. The suspension followed the release of a video where Coote made offensive remarks about ex-Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp, as well as another video showing him allegedly using drugs. UEFA launched an investigation, and Coote's contract was terminated by the PGMOL in December. I mean, gents, this story just blew everyone's mind. Firstly, start with you, Mark. What were your initial reactions when you saw the news broke of David Coote's ban?
being honest, I wasn't bothered because I'm not really interested in refereeing anymore. But as a person, I didn't really know David that well because he was coming through the Football League when I was about to quit. I think he was in one season when I left. So I didn't really know him as a person. I know, looking at his career, he was doing quite well as a VAR in UEFA. He was trusted in the Euro Championships as an assistant VAR. So he was respected. I think he was more respected as a VAR certainly than he was as a referee, and the two different skill sets, of course. What's interesting was, there's a couple of things here is, I used to get criticised because I wouldn't want to speak when I was a referee. Now it's clear you don't really want to speak because everything you say can certainly have an impact later in your refereeing career. Because what he did with Jurgen Klopp, for example, that could happen. You could talk about players. People say, who's the worst coaches? Who's the best coaches? We'll have these discussions with your friends in a pub, for example. But one thing it doesn't happen is it doesn't go on a mobile phone. And I think the world's changed so much that everything's recorded. Everything is put on a mobile phone. And, I remember, Bobby Madley getting sacked for a text message that he'd sent to his ex-wife. And certain things can be used against you later in life. And I think one of the naive things David did was, maybe his partner, his friend or whoever he was, he shared that information on, and he's used it against him later on in his career, which I'm sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm not sure that would have been a sackable offence. I think it was certainly a disciplinary offence of what he said about Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool Football Club, but it certainly wasn't I would hope that it wasn't a refereeing career ending moment, but certainly the video, that isn't a great, looking from an outside, if my child wants to be a referee, for example, it's not a great image that we've got a person who is on UEFA duty, doing this type of thing. He's naive to send the video on to whoever he has, but it's certainly not a great image. And, we talked about the pressures before. Has he done it for the pressures? There's something underlying, because knowing David and you do get certainly tested when you do FIFA tournaments for your blood and different things. I don't know if it would ever be pulled up, but there was talk years ago that referees should be drug tested. They're not, because there's not really a performance enhancing thing that a referee can gain from taking drugs. So player, yes, but certainly not a referee. But you don't know what's going on in his personal life, the pressures of the job, but he had opportunities to seek some support. And I think people would have acknowledged it if he'd come out and said, look, I've got a problem.
Is there support available for referees if they're feeling the hardships of this kind of stuff?
PGM will have a lot of people that would even source people. If you went to your employee, PGM will are duty bound to protect you. And there was times when I asked not to have a match for a couple of weeks because there's something going on in my life, and they wouldn't give you a match because why would they want to, me to go in a wrong mindset? But there's plenty of opportunities for David to raise his issues and what was going on, but he left it too late, because once it came into the public domain and, he'd already done the act and hadn't done anything about it. Once that came out, it's really difficult for him to have his refereeing career. And going back to what I said before, it's going to be difficult for him as an individual getting employment full stop, because of what he's done. And he's lost his industries. He's going to have to probably go to some colleges or universities to retrain doing something. So it's going to be a difficult time for him. And I'm sure even now PGM will be supporting him because it's a really difficult situation. I know when I got sacked in 2008 for something that I was alleged to have done, I cleared my name, but it was a really low part of your life because you don't know what's going to happen. you're doing something that you love and all of a sudden it's taken away. But he was so naive in sending them videos on to people, because going back to when I first started, we didn't have mobile phones. Now everything's recorded. So he should have been aware of that. And it's sad situation, but one that I don't really know Dave Coote that well. So it's, I don't feel anything when I'm an ex-referee, but it's a sad situation and one that could have been avoided.
I think, yeah, the real sadness to me was the fact, as it came out afterwards in what I would say are, uneasy circumstances in an interview with the newspaper that had published a lot of the videos, is the fact that David Coote in 2024, I suppose 2025 now, clearly felt that he still had to conceal the fact he was gay, which is, you'd really like to think as a society we should really have moved on from by now. This is not a thing anymore. But he obviously felt that whether it's the environment of football or whether it's his family circumstances, I don't know, but the fact that that was clearly, or his interpretation of it is that was kind of what lay at the root of a lot of the pressure, the stress he was under, I think is incredibly sad. As much as Mark is completely right, like the video, allowing that stuff to be recorded is incredibly naive. And it's not just a referee who should kind of think that. It's literally, if you are listening to this and have a job, do not record that stuff. If you want to do it in your private life, that's not a problem. But obviously it's illegal, but I'm not condoning anything. But like, don't record stuff that can cost you your job. That's common sense. But I think it's something we should all... There is a sadness to seeing someone who's clearly, as Mark's talked about, kind of the work that he went through to get to where he was. And David Coote will have done something similar. He'll have devoted a lot of his life to refereeing. It's clearly a thing that he loved. I referee occasionally for my son's under-17, and after my first game was abused by my father-in-law. So like, there's a lot of pressure you're under. You've got to go through a lot as a referee.
What kind of competitive household do you live in? Like, what's going on?
It was a penalty, but my son made too much of it, and I decided not to give it to teach him a lesson. But David Coote will have worked incredibly hard to get where he was, and this is what I mean about treating referees as humans first and foremost. Is that he'll have made a lot of sacrifices to build his career to the point where he was refereeing, assistant refereeing, acting as VAR in the Premier League. That is as high in your career as most of us will ever get, and to lose it all, I think on a human level is really sad.
Yeah. Mark, just very quickly, we talk about conspiracies and all that, and integrity of the game, and the integrity fans have towards, or trying to have towards, referees. I mean, that this can't help those kind of situations, surely. All those extra questions that fans are wondering about a referee's allegiances or how they feel about certain players, especially with the Jurgen Klopp comment.
Nah, listen, it's a difficult one, because I've made jokes in the past, like when you're after dinner speaking, because one thing that people label referees are the boring, and it's hard because you're not boring. You're out with your friends and that they're asking you the same questions, and you can't turn around and say, "Yeah, shut up." Do you know what I mean? Because you've got friends. It's there's banter, of course, and it's difficult because you're in a very different world, of course, but it stays there, and it's just. What he said, I'm not sure what he'd said about Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp. Certainly, whatever he thinks, I think everybody's thinking the same. But it's just naive that he's put it on the public domain, and getting like that, like Rory said, he's at such a low point of his life. But I wouldn't want to be using his certain excuses, because the world's changed so much for support. For David but it's just I got labelled boring for years. When I was a referee, I wouldn't go out, I wouldn't go on holiday with my friends because I didn't want to put myself in the environment. But then I had some really good friends. If I did go, I remember going on a trip to Dubai, and my friends would completely look after us. They would protect us. They wouldn't let us even get photos, but people would get upset about it. But they were there just to protect. And I don't think David had that network around him that protected him like I was. And, I can come out and say it now because I'm not going back into refereeing, and I certainly wouldn't want to go into PGM well. So therefore I can say certain things, but, it's not helpful. Yeah, we've all got opinions about Jurgen Klopp, and I'm sure Jurgen Klopp has opinions about me. But Jurgen Klopp wouldn't say, I don't like Mark Clattenburg to the media, but he'd probably say to his friend down the pub. There's a difference, and I think we've got to find a balance sometimes in life where, were allowed an opinion, were allowed to say things without his integrity being called into question, that wouldn't be the case. Because, people say I'm a Man United fan, and I say the same thing to them. Are you stupid? And they're like, well, why?
Yeah, to be honest, Mark, it's a real mystery who you support. Yeah, it's a real mystery.
No, but Rory, this is the stupid thing is, even though I speak in a strange accent, and I'm a great accent after the Sunday, but I go to them, are you really stupid? And they go, well, what do you mean? I says, you tell me which referee in the world has ever give 3 penalties against Man United for Liverpool. Are you stupid? If I'm a Man United fan, do you think I'm going to give your arch enemies 3 frigging penalties at Old Trafford? Clueless. They're clueless.
Oh,
and that's
man.
But that's the problem is everybody's obsessed. They're obsessed about who you support and stuff. There's nothing wrong with David. David Coote didn't make them decisions based on he didn't like Jurgen Klopp. I didn't like Jurgen Klopp when he was Dortmund manager. I had a big fight with him when he was at Dortmund. That didn't say when he came to Liverpool, I hated him. I respected him as a coach. I respect him as a person. I might not like him, but that doesn't say I had anything against Liverpool. It's crazy to think this. David Coote had an issue. He didn't have anything to do with care about Liverpool. He was a Notts County fan who has nothing to do with Liverpool. He just got upset about the way Jurgen Klopp is with David Coote, and he has the right, because I've had run-ins with coaches and they say things in the heat of the battle, and you think, well, I don't like him. It's just human reaction, but you don't go out in public and personally go and I'm going to give it a penalty against Liverpool today because I don't like Jurgen Klopp. I think we're crazy if we think like this. This is just stupidity.
All right, let's end it here, because the real reason we got you on here, we've talked about your career, but the real reason we got you on here is because obviously you're the referee on one of the greatest entertainment shows on TV right now, Gladiators. Our American fans would have heard about American Gladiators, same one here in the UK, but there was a guy on the UK version called John Anderson, a Scottish referee, and known for his legendary status. Now, Mark, you have taken that legendary status. Talk to me about turning your back on football and heading into the world of entertainment right now. It's one of the biggest shows on telly.
No, it was a crazy thing, because I remember I watched it as a child, so I was hooked. I loved the Gladiators when I was a child. So when they were talking about remaking, I got a phone call, and I was abroad, and they said, "Oh no, we've got to go and we need to have an interview with you. We want a Zoom call about being the head referee on Gladiators." And I thought, oh, that would be quite a cool thing. I've got a young family. I thought they would like that. And when I got the interview, and they weren't really keen on us doing it, because they thought, I was too high profile for the role, and they felt that, maybe I was too much for it. But I came across well. I'm a team player. I try to keep it as, what they want. It's a game show, it's a family show, and we're trying to entertain as well as it is quite competitive as well. And it's certainly the second series was really competitive, so I've had to put the contenders and the Gladiators in check a few times. But it's a role that when you tell your daughter that I'm going to be referee at Gladiators, it's cool for her, because she goes to school, all her friends are watching it, and she's like, my dad's Gladiators referee. But so to take over from John Anderson, who everybody knew was so iconic, and for me being allowed to do that, my part of my career, because like I said, I don't want to go back into refereeing. I'm finished now. I'm 50 years old. I'm past all of that. I want to try new things, and being on the telly is not easy, because you get one chance. My voice went in the second series, and that sounded like Joe Pasquale for a moment. But it's so great to do, and it's so you see the happiness. And one thing I missed in life, and I'm guilty of it as well, really guilty of it. I don't spend enough time, really quality time. I did at the weekend watching the match with my daughter, and I didn't really bond for a while, and I feel we're getting that back with Gladiators, where families are sitting down again in front of the television on a Saturday night. And I think that's what we all remember. And I think we lost that for a long period of our lives, where, we didn't really get together again. And there wasn't really much on the TV that we all could get together and watch, because the parents are still watching it, as well as the children. And I think it's brought families back together in a good way. And I think, for me, it certainly helped me, because it gave me a chance to bond with my young family, and we can watch something together, because she either wants to watch Gladiators or The Apprentice, and it's bloody every time we're now sharing this, programs together that we both watch together. And I think me being a part of it is quite a cool thing for her. I can wear my black and white shirt, which is great because being a Newcastle fan, that's another thing. I might even get number
just down
25.
the high street. You just want to be recognised, don't you?
I'm going to get Wembley 25 on the back.
Well, we watch it. So I've got my kids are 7 and 3, and we watch it. Is now like from the first series. It is a family institution, and my son, who's a football fan, will occasionally be interested if I say I've spoken to someone in football, but Mark Clattenburg, the referee from Gladiators, that is how he engages with you. Yeah. But it is, you're right, it's that family entertainment. My wife watches it for Phantom, which is really nice.
So does my wife.
But the question that I've been burning to ask you, Mark, and this might just be my ear, might be because I'm the same as you. I remember watching the original series when I was a kid, and that John Anderson 3-2-1. Are you doing a Scottish accent when you say it?
Everybody asks, is that right? Remember, I'm only 20 miles from the border.
That's
so
true.
you've got to remember.
I'm
not that far to the border. So but it's weird because even I know Geordie accents are quite strong, so I do try and change my accent, of course, when I'm trying to talk and stuff, because people certainly won't understand at all. But it does come across, but I don't mean it to come across like a Scottish accent. It may be the way I go, 3, 2. It sounds Scottish. But
you just wanted him to do it, didn't you, Rory? I see you.
Yeah. But I tell you, like, what I like about it, the comments, you still get abused now. I still get abused if I make wrong decisions. However,
on Gladiators.
Yeah.
Oh, man,
terrific. Some of the stuff I get. But what's nice about it is there's a lot more positives than I was as a referee. And what I think is because people are so happy again. Nobody's happy in football for some reason. Even if you win, you're still upset. Where Gladiators, people are just happy again. And I think, it sees me in a different world where, I was Mark Clattenburg, the referee who used to want to spoil football matches. That's what everybody used to think. Now I'm trying to be part of an entertainment show, and I feel that my role, I'm getting more confident in the role. Of course, when I first started the role, I didn't know what to do, but I'm growing into the role now, and, not replacing John Anderson, but I certainly want to be as close to him, because to lose that iconic thing would be it wouldn't be the same. And I think, even I'll try a bit more Scottish in the next series if we do the next series.
just go full, wear a kilt.
Yeah.
Just go full on Scottish.
Yeah.
Honestly, gents, I could sit here and chat to you some more, but I know you've got to enjoy your time in the sun, Mark. So enjoy the lovely weather out there. But honestly, really appreciate you joining us on the podcast. Rory as well, you were brilliant today. Thank you so much for joining us. And also thank you guys for watching as well. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also why not comment below with your thoughts as well. That's it for now. We'll catch you very soon. If you want to watch more episodes of the show, please subscribe to the channel. We'll be joined by the likes of David Ornstein, Matt Slater, Adam Crafton, Carl Anker, and plenty more through the season. If you'd like to listen to the episodes in full in audio form, search The Athletic FC wherever you get your podcasts from.